So today on Geek Meets, we're joined by Steve Baxter. Hello, Steve.
Good morning, Aaron. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you keeping?
Very well, thank you. Very well. Just getting over COVID, as we discussed,
Yeah,
as
absolutely. Yeah.
so many other people are.
The COVID twins. So there you go. So over the next three parts, Steve and I are going to discuss all things CRM. So both Steve and I are hopefully going to give you some insight into the world of CRM, some of the pitfalls, and also some of the overwhelming benefits of choosing the right partner. And then over the next couple of parts, the next stage, how you can adopt and implement the CRM and software into your business, and then how you can utilize the CRM in helping you to scale your business to the next level. So, but before we go into the discussion, Steve, can you give me a brief bio and tell me what your role is at ZOHO, please, and hopefully what you're looking to achieve over the next 12 months in your role?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Aaron. So I'm Steve Baxter. I have the glorious title of Enterprise Marketing Manager for ZOHO in the UK. Brief bio first. So I've been in marketing far longer than I will admit, but I have worked for all kinds of organizations, big and large. So I think many years ago, I worked for Kyocera, the printer and copier company, or Kyocera, it's properly called, but we all call it Kyocera in the UK.
Yeah. Nobody
Um,
knows.
and
Nobody
that
knows.
obviously was a huge organization, multi-trillion yen turnover. And then I've also worked for lots of SMEs. Last business was I worked at for 9 years as an SME engineering company in West Bromwich. So I've worked for all kinds of organizations doing all kinds of marketing, general marketing, channel marketing, and so on. And now with ZOHO, my role is all about moving our customer base from what we call the retail sector, which is businesses under 25 staff, so the SME sector, where we are very, very strong already, into the mid-market, so 25, 250 users, and then enterprise 250 users and above. Because it's funny, we've been at a variety of events and you see how big enterprises do things, and actually the problems they face are very, very similar to the problems that small businesses face. They just try to fix them in a very, very different way. So we've realized that from a technology point of view, we've got everything we need. We're just not known in that space.
Yeah, fantastic. So it's great that you're on here. We're actually a customer ourselves from a sales geek perspective. We use ZOHO CRMs, which is really nice.
What a great choice.
Yeah, what a great choice. Very discerning we are. So, in this discussion, we're probably going to talk broadly for anybody watching this or listening to this about the advantages of CRM. But there are some pitfalls, Steve, as you're probably aware of.
Many.
But, many, yeah, and I've lived it as a sales leader without a shadow of a doubt. So, but in this, we're going to discuss this over kind of three parts. And in this first part, we're going to really start talking about positioning your business ready for CRM. So that kind of process that you go through to select the right partner, to be able to help your business. So which is really important. I'm sure Steve will come into that now in a second. And I suppose the first question for you right off the bat, Steve, is CRM always needed in a business? And if so, what's the task that you should complete first when you're looking to choose a CRM provider?
Well, my sales teams will probably kill me, but no, it's not always needed. Absolutely not. It is one of those things that will help you if you have a relatively large customer base or complex relationships with your customers. One of the examples, I mean, you mentioned this now, I was going to mention it later, but one of the examples I have in my mind is a friend of mine works for a very large automotive component supplier, basically a Japanese company, offices in several parts of the world, multi-tens of £1 million turnover every single year, does not use CRM. And they don't use CRM because they only have, I think it's 6 customers that matter anyway. And it's all about managing projects. Project management, they've got that coming out their ears. But CRM, the relationship management side of things, they don't need that so much. I wouldn't say it's definitely a no-no for them, because quite often CRM now is used as, if you like, the central linchpin of the customer experience platform. So they have support systems that feed into CRM, they have marketing systems that feed into CRM, etc. So they might adopt, a company like that might adopt CRM as the linchpin for lots of other applications. But pure CRM, sometimes you don't need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it covers a lot of ills, doesn't it, in terms of the word CRM, because there's a lot of bespoke programs out there for businesses as well. And there's sort of off the shelf versions as well that kind of fly into the mix. So, my experience going into certain businesses, you ask them if they have a CRM and they point you to something, which in their idea is a CRM system. But, if you and I were to look at it, we probably think, no, it's not quite what we mean by CRM, but I know what you mean. It's a piece of software that you're using at the moment to do something with. So, but I'm thinking like of the compelling event, really. So, a business right now in that kind of SME space, who's, looking or having a conversation along the lines of, I think we need a CRM. What would they kind of typically, what's that compelling event that would, start that conversation?
Well, I mean, the first thing is any business is there to make money. At the end of the day, sounding too much like a capitalist, I know, but it's there to make money. So if something is working already, don't change it. So if you're just thinking of getting CRM because Joe down the pub the other day said, haven't you got CRM? You really ought to. Or God forbid, a CRM salesperson said that.
Yeah, exactly.
Excuse me again.
COVID biting.
Yeah. So, there's a lovely quote from Jeff Bezos who goes on about people always asking what's going to change in the next 10 years. And he's far more interested in what's going to stay the same, because you can build a business on what stays the same.
Yeah.
So when you look at CRM, if your business is running great and there are no particular problems in, if you like, your sales operations, then don't either deploy CRM or change your CRM system. Because if it's working, then don't try and fix it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But typically, though, organizations are not in the situation where everything in their sales or operation works perfectly. So they'll be turning around and they'll have their monthly sales meetings, and the MD might be there and the sales manager or sales director's there. And they're having, I don't know, I mean, I've sat in many of these meetings as a marketing person who gets to say 3 words at the end of 4 hours worth of meetings. So I've sat through a lot of these. And it's always the same. How come we haven't followed up that lead? This is really important. What's happened in the last month? And there's this massive silence that goes around the room. So if there are problems in your sales operation, that's where your CRM system can start helping. And the typical kind of things you get, you're not you ignoring leads. That's an absolute classic one. And if you don't have a CRM system, then it's very difficult to know what leads you should be looking at.
That's right.
So you'll have a situation where, if we're honest, a lot of organizations have more leads than they can actually handle, but they've got to work out which ones they should be focusing on. So they want a system that says, for some reason, the probability of that lead is quite high. We've got to keep on top of it. The value of that lead is quite high. We've got to keep on top of it. That lead over there, it's the MD's cousin, so he wants us to look at it really closely, but actually it's not going to make us any money, and we're probably not going to get it anyway. So we really ought to ignore that and just, brush that under the carpet while he's away having a cup of coffee. So it's a question of finding out with a CRM system what leads you should be focusing on. And then it also helps enormously with processes as well. So if you're in an organization where sales isn't as easy as picking an item from a catalog and dispatching it, if there's something more complicated, if it's a higher value negotiation, then CRM, you can easily put processes in place that say, these are steps 1, 2, 3, up to 15, whatever they happen to be. This is what we have to go through. It doesn't necessarily mean you're sending out lots of documents to people. It's just, this is what will help us increase the probability of landing the deal. And it means that the sales manager at any point can also look at leads and say, this is how far we've got with this lead. This is why this lead is precarious. And it doesn't mean that the only time they get an update on a lead is when they do their monthly sales meetings. It means there's a system in place that always tells the sales manager what the situation is with any lead. And it takes give and take. from salespeople and sales managers to use CRM properly as well. Because if you're going to ask a salesperson to put information into a CRM system, then as a sales manager, you've got to get into the habit of looking for answers in the CRM system and not phoning up your salespeople and saying, oh, by the way, what's happening with deal X? Because a salesperson turns around and says, I put it in the CRM system. Why are you phoning me? What's the point of me putting it in the CRM system if you're not going to look for the answers there? So, you know, that's a classic situation of why people would have CRM. But that's just looking at a very, very narrow focus on sales.
Yes.
CRM is about a lot more than sales. It should be the whole customer relationship should be in there. So when you've got different departments with their own spreadsheets and their own little databases of information about customers, it just becomes impossible then. I'm going to avoid some of the horrendous jargon we come out with, but you know, you do want one place that contains all the information about a customer, because as a salesperson, if you're going in to renegotiate a deal or extend a contract or upsell something or cross sell, whatever, you want to know if they've had problems with their products in the past. And you can't rely on the fact that anecdotally someone told you about a problem while you were having a cup of coffee with them. It's got to be written there in the system. So you've got to have that central location. Shall I carry on with it, because there are loads and loads of reasons why.
I think you're right to say from the sales, because obviously I'm sort of very biased with regards to sales, and you know, if I think of it sort of again anecdotally for me in my experience, because obviously having been in sales for sort of 20 plus years, as a salesperson, when I was first sort of out and about on the road and meeting with customers, you know, knowing what I know now about what a CRM could do, I would have loved the ability to have a centralized repository of information that would give me, you know, organize my diary for me, tell me where I'm going for the day, show me my previous history of a customer, you know, let me know, you know, information about how my deals are progressing and where they are and how I can forecast as a salesperson. But you're right, you know, CRMs can be more all-encompassing than just what we use from a sales perspective. So, but I'm thinking, you mentioned just a minute ago about processes, because this is the bit that it really concerns me when I see businesses trying to make that leap from multiple spreadsheets and different levels of software and various bits of reporting and analytics, and then they want to make that leap into adopting a CRM. You mentioned process. What's that kind of? Because I usually see that process part of it is skipped over. It's just bought off the shelf, and now what do we do with it? So what's important before you kind of even begin that first steps, Steve?
Yeah, I suppose the first one, I'll try and avoid the really boring stuff that people have heard before, but the only one I will mention is put a team together, first of all. If you're looking for ways to guarantee CRM will fail, the best way to do it is to have one person in the organization who says, this is what you're going to use, and do not argue with me.
That's it.
Because if you don't get everyone's opinions, you'll end up with a system that doesn't work, that no one wants to use, and it'll sit there. You'll pay for it for about 2 years, then you'll dump it. So always put together a team for everyone involved. So you need, you know, they might just be need to be made aware of what's going on. They might want absolute involvement in everything that happens, whatever. Just make sure that everyone affected is on board and knows what's going on.
You know, and do you have a preference with regards to that, Steve? What's your preference? I mean, because my preference is engage all stakeholders, you know, and have almost like a power team with regards to this, because we're going to discuss it probably in part 2 with regards to implementation and adoption. You know, I usually find that's where it kind of fails a little bit, is that, you know, you've not got as many stakeholders involved in the beginning process, you know, or is it just more, hey guys, this is what we're thinking of bringing on board. What's your view on it? What's your preference?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to get leadership involved. So you've got, you know, for CRM, you've got to have the sales director, sales manager, whatever, involved. You've got to have the CEO or the MD involved at some level. They won't want to know the intricacies, but they'll want to know that the organization you're buying from is a reputable organization, and, you know, due diligence that supports processes put in place, etc. You really ought to have marketing involved, because CRM can be so useful to marketing.
It really can.
You're going to have IT involved. You're probably going to have operations involved, because it's going to deal with ERP and MRP systems as well. And you're probably going to have service involved. So again, CRM doesn't directly involve service, but
No.
if you're going to build a platform that can handle everything to do with customer experience, so service as well, service systems and CRM systems have to talk to each other. So you may as well get the service people involved as well.
Yeah.
The question which we couldn't answer in this podcast is, how involved should they be? And it depends a lot on, how involved they want to be, because you've got to make them aware. This takes a lot of time. It sucks up a lot of time, which is again why you don't do it unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah.
And there's a definite business need. You don't do it just because you think that would be an interesting project for 2023 or something.
Exactly.
You've got to absolutely know.
I think I've fallen into that trap before in my naivety early days. You must have a CRM, and let's put a CRM into the business. And then you find retrospectively, we weren't ready for it. There were we weren't looking at our internal processes first and foremost to be able to understand how a CRM fits into it. So I've definitely made that mistake. Now I'm much more cautious. I kind of think the business has to be primed and ready with processes in place and really clearly defined. And then how does a CRM amplify that? How does it make that process, even work even better for them? So I've kind of gone through that learning myself, absolutely, as a sales leader. Let's get a CRM and then think, why did we do this?
Yeah. Well, another step that people do and jump in too quickly is say, we need CRM, let's go and talk to some CRM vendors. Either, if they sell direct like ZOHO, let's go and talk to ZOHO, or let's go and talk to a HubSpot partner or Salesforce partner or something like that, a local business. That's way down the line. That you do an awful lot of work before you ever speak to anyone who might actually supply a CRM system. And we've been talking processes. One of the key things you do is work out what your processes are. So, your typical sales process, if you're just selling things from a catalog, then fair enough, it might be quite simple, your business. But when you start looking at it, it tends to not be quite as simple as you thought it was. We tend to think of our processes as simple because we look at the ideal situation. Someone's buying two of something, they want both items delivered at the same time to somewhere in the UK, and it's a simple product that can be put in a jiffy bag and put in the post. Well, half the time our businesses don't run like that. If someone's going to order two, they want one this week and they want another one next week, and they want one sent to Dagenham and one sent to Daventry, and they want different pricing on each of them. You've got to write down these processes, and the one tool there that you've got to get to love is Lucidchart or something like that. Because when you start putting down what your processes are, first of all, if you do ISO accreditation, something like that, they absolutely wet their pants if you show them a flowchart.
That's right. So, exactly. It ticks a big box.
I was amazed when, with this business in the West Midlands, when we did that and I showed them a flowchart. I couldn't believe their reaction. So, first of all, it's great for that purpose, but also it makes you realize what your processes are. And it makes you realize that the norm might be great, but there are lots of exceptions as well. And you have to prepare for those exceptions before you start wanting to convert those processes from the manual way of doing things to a way that's assisted by CRM systems.
We'll come on to automation in part 3, because obviously then you get to the stage where CRM can really just make your life just wonderfully simple and the customer journey so much easier as a result. So we'll talk about that a little bit down the line. Lucidchart is an interesting one. That's something that I was only a convert to about 6 months ago, and now can't stop playing with it from a strategy perspective, because it's absolutely fantastic. So it's a great tip, that, Steve, for anybody on here who's not aware of it, there are other programs available. Obviously, I'm duty bound to say that, but Lucidcharts, are a really simple and easy way for you to be able to get what's in your mind and flying around and buzzing about, and get it down into some sort of meaningful process on paper, and then you can build it out from there. So it's a really great tip, that.
Absolutely. And it's just one of those things as well. When you have it down there, it means some people will turn around and say, I know what to do. Why do I need to write it down? Well, you're not doing it for the people you already employ. You're doing it for the people you employ in the future. The whole thing about CRM is, if that person leaves the business, how ready are you to pick up A, the processes they used to follow, and B, the relationships they have with your customers?
Yeah, exactly.
If you haven't got both of those built into your CRM system, you're starting from scratch again. That is a terrible position for any business to be in.
Yeah, I agree.
It's all about getting ready for, we always quote that example of someone falling under a bus. That doesn't happen. But people move on to different business companies all the time. You've got to be ready for that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I've seen that and I've lived that, where, you go back to that first point you said, which I think is such a great tip in terms of, build that team, get that sort of, and don't sit it with just one individual, because typically that one individual moves on to pastures new, and then it's almost, and in some cases you may have invested quite a few £1,000s in a CRM, and it's painful to be able to pick that up and run with it again, and can usually set you back a good period of time, that's for sure. So process is really important. I think it's critical prior to any adoption, all of that hard work first before CRM comes, because before you even pick up the phone to have a conversation with somebody. But out of all of those processes, which ones are more essential, Steve? Which ones do you really have to make sure you focus on?
Well, to be honest, I don't think I could answer that, because it'll depend on the business.
It does, obviously, but
you better clap at that point, because I can hear the dog barking. So we're gonna have to. Do you want to ask that question again? I think it's shut up now.
Yeah, I just thought, so think about process. I know it's quite general because each business is very different, and it's not easy to put it, but processes are really important. So in terms of that planning and that process, what absolutely is essential for a business to look at from a process point of view before they even begin to think about this?
Okay, I think that will vary from business to business.
It does, yeah.
But I think the key thing to ask yourself is how many of those processes that you're thinking about are actually essential.
That's a great question.
Because we do get wedded to, this is the way we've always done business. This is the way we're going to do it in future. And then you get yourself in a situation where you either have to buy a phenomenally expensive CRM system to cope with these really awkward ways of doing business, or you buy a less expensive CRM system, and then you basically have to reprogram part of it. I mean, I don't mean automations, which we can do in ZOHO, and I think every other vendor can do automation. I mean, changing the actual way the program works. And we got into this situation in the past where we used an organization I used to work for. They had Dynamics, Microsoft Dynamics, and it was a relatively small organization, but we had an IT developer, a programmer on permanent staff, who all the time was making changes to this, to Dynamics, to make it work the way our business worked. And you've got to start thinking, that was a recipe for disaster, because every time there was an update, it broke things. And it was literally so many things. We can't do that with AX. We can't do that with AX. We can't do that because of this reason or that reason. And you've got to start thinking, it will be far better sometimes to change the business to suit the software than it is to change the software to suit the business. It's a very, very difficult argument to persuade people on, because they want to do things the way they think they should be done. But sometimes you've just got to turn around and say, it'd be far better if we change things, and it changed our way of doing businesses. So some processes, I would say, do not convert. Change the process to suit what your software can do.
Yeah, I think this is great, and this is why these discussions are really good, because I think about personal experience, and I've had conversations at board level with individuals who are talking about why can't we get the software to do X, Y, and Z, rather than why can't we look at our internal process, because it makes much more sense, because then it would make our life easier and the software can do that, rather than putting a call into a software provider, CRM provider, and saying, have you got this development coming down the line to make it do the thing that we want it to do? And think, well,
I mean, when you deploy a new CRM system, whether it's an upgrade from an old one or whether it's your first, it's an opportunity to simplify your business. And in many ways, simplification is harder than adopting complexity, because if you adopt complexity, then it's just keeping on what you've already done. And so trying to turn people around and say there's a better way of doing things, that takes a lot of persuading.
Yeah, I think so. And it's the ilk of a small business, right? They are spinning a lot of plates, and it's very hard for them to sometimes take the time out of the business to look at the way that they're conducting business and they're engaging with the client, and look at maybe changing that, other than or go to the easier option, get a CRM in place and hope that it can do the job, and let's just focus on what it, and battle maybe a little bit with it to make sure it's fit for purpose. So so this is great. So it's important. So tips so far, Steve, with regards to definitely, build a team, get some sort of consensus with regards to it. Definitely think about your business right now from a profit and a turnover, whether or not there's a compelling event to actually adopt a CRM right now, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it, kind of thing. So they're definitely great tips with regards to that. And look at your processes and be willing to, through that actual process of doing that, be willing to adapt it to think about whether or not we can change to be able to fully adopt a CRM. So those are really good tips so far. But when you this is all, and all of this is before picking up the phone call. This is important.
Absolutely.
This is, before you even had that conversation. And I'm thinking now that sort of next bit now, we're moving into sort of data, because data is absolutely king with regards to everything now, and everybody's looking at how they manage the data, how they store it, how they utilize it, how they engage with it. So so that what sort of data do you kind of need, so what do you need to think about from a data perspective before you even engage with the CRM?
Okay, I mean, the key thing is you need the data that will support the way you sell. And that will obviously vary, because there's no point keeping data if you're not going to use it, because it takes time to collect. So, how do you sell? So do you sell geographically, or maybe not? Do you sell? Might you want to sell geographically? So, it could be different parts of the UK, it could be international, whatever. If you do sell geographically, you need to store that information. So you need to have a nation field, you need to have maybe a county field. Does anyone use counties anymore? Probably not, I wouldn't have thought.
Probably not.
But sometimes you fall back on that, because postcodes, I get used to using postcodes all the time, which are fantastic, but other countries aren't quite as good on postcodes as the UK is. So if you're selling internationally, then maybe postcode isn't the best way of working out where someone is. But it'll be up to you or someone's business to decide how they sell geographically. Or industry. A lot of people do vertical market selling. It's very common. There are lots of reasons why you shouldn't do that, but there are plenty of reasons why you should as well. So how are you going to define industries? Are you going to create your own industry classifications? There's a lot of good reasons for doing that. The main reason against that is if you ever need to use an external organization to cleanse your data, they probably won't be able to do it with your industry classifications. So then you might want to use SICs or ISIC, which is the UN version of it.
That's right.
Key thing, though, is, I've seen this in, I'm too embarrassed to say how many CRM systems, a field that allows you to put in one industry code. Well, nowadays, how many businesses only do one thing? They do lots of things.
They do.
So if you're doing an industry field, I'll move on very quickly after this, it's got to accept more than one industry, because so many businesses do more than one thing.
Absolutely.
Every business wants to do cross-selling and upselling. So
Yeah.
CRM
Vital.
needs at some point some way of recording in the CRM system what people have purchased in the past. It's probably not a full link to your sales ledger, but you need to know what categories of products people have bought. You probably need some idea of the level of business they do with you. So you can do separate systems for people who are big customers and separate systems for people who are smaller customers.
That's right.
You absolutely have to know people's job roles.
You do.
So it seems very obvious, but a lot of people will say, as long as I've got a job title in there, that's absolutely fine. But job titles nowadays are, the greatest work of fiction since Dickens, I think. You get, well, I mean, look at me, I'm enterprise marketing manager. What the hell does that mean? Really? So, you don't have sales director, sales manager, salesperson anymore. You've got business development executive and
SDRs
and are these senior people or junior people? Is business development, is that sales or marketing? So you need, yes, a job title field, but you need a job role field as well. So when I was at the last business, the engineering firm in the West Midlands, I developed this basically a translation spreadsheet that had, I think it was 17,000 job titles in it that condensed into 7 job roles.
Excellent.
Which would be manager or not manager. Then it would be sales, finance, general operations, whatever. I can't remember what. You need that so that you can target your messaging. You don't want to over target, but you need to know who's in charge of what.
Yeah, that categorization is really important because it will just boggle your brain to some degree. It's that sort of, we call it decision-making unit, in terms of what's the category of individual with regards to it, and categorizing those multiple job titles is really important to help condense that data down into something a bit more manageable for you.
It is. It's absolutely essential. You need to know about the company size. So again, you could do that by turnover. I would prefer to do that by staff nowadays because Companies House doesn't list turnover for smaller businesses, but it does still list staff. So in anyone's annual accounts, they'll always say how many staff they've got, but they don't necessarily need to say what their revenue is.
That's right.
I made some notes before this, as you know, and the next one, I'm embarrassed. I'm so embarrassed to say this, but
please say it.
First name and last name. You've got to have the basic contact details there. So we're talking about all kinds of fancy things about what you should do with CRM, but you've got to have a person's details in there in the first place. You've got to have a way of communicating with them. You need their email address, you need their phone number, maybe their mobile number, maybe their LinkedIn details if you've got Sales Navigator. You need a way of communicating with them. Otherwise, CRM is going to get you absolutely nowhere.
Nowhere, exactly.
And you might decide as well, depending on your business, that for email addresses you won't accept generic email addresses, Gmail, Outlook.com, etc. You only want business addresses.
Business ones,
so,
exactly.
I used to do that. It'll depend on the business. You've absolutely got to be aware of the legalities of situations. So
I think some people really trip up on this, and this is where you've got to be a little bit careful with regards to it, because obviously GDPR and obviously European wide as well. So it's not just in the UK with regards to this in terms of what your responsibility as an employee, as an employer, and as a business in terms of what you do with data, and data integrity is really important now, isn't it?
Yeah. So you've got to make sure that everyone always has the opportunity to change their opt-out of communications, etc., change their preferences. And obviously it's slightly different if you're B2C to B2B, but this isn't a podcast all about GDPR, so I'll skip over.
I can see the audience just falling asleep as we're speaking.
They've just
switched off.
All I'd say is go beyond what the law requires, because it's better from a marketing point of view as well. So give people not just the opportunity to opt in or opt out, but to choose the kind of communications they get. It'll actually help you. There's no point ever sending messages to people if they're not interested in them. So give them the opportunity to say, if I'm Volvo, I'm interested in SUV, or no, say I'm Porsche, I'm interested in SUVs, but I'm not interested in little 2-seater sports cars. Give people the opportunity to say don't bother me with
Oh,
that kind
thanks.
of rubbish. I'm only
Yes.
interested in that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to be, if you're going to do any kind of customer service, you want to be able to record results from surveys. So at the very basic level, NPS, Net Promoter Score, that kind of thing, you want to record that kind of thing within your CRM system. And then you have another instance that's quite interesting, because obviously CRM is a living beast.
Yes.
As you record information, as your salespeople go out and meet customers, you need to record those meetings and the outcome of those meetings. And there's no correct answer to this, but if I come out and meet you, do I record the outcome of that meeting against Aaron Sussex's record, or do I record it against Sales Geek? And there's arguments in both ways. The one argument is, I've met you, it should go against you. Seems obvious. But on the other hand,
obvious to me.
Yeah, if you leave Sales Geek and goes to Sales Nerd next year or something like that, then all the information goes with you, and the information that belongs with Sales Geek has disappeared. Now there are ways you can fix that. It's just the kind of thing you need to set a process up in advance so that you're ready for both of those situations. So that's quite a long answer, wasn't it? So
but it's important though.
It's fundamental. Yeah,
it is. It's kind of, but really, I suppose a good CRM system allows you the opportunity now to kind of organize your data, have a central repository of it to some degree, because I bet that many businesses right now have data in multiple different pots. And depending on the function in the business, like you said, service or operations or sales may have different data or different engagements with that data. So the ability to be able to organize that, and we're going to come on to data integrity a little bit later in one of the other parts as well, Steve, because it's really important, isn't it, in terms of how you manage it, and what the outcome is if you don't manage it very well, which kind of a real knock-on. We'll discuss that in the next part. So one of the things that I also think about is, because there are many CRM providers out there right now, I'm a business owner at the moment, and I think to myself, okay, I've gone through all of those great tips and I've made sure I'm ready, but actually it's quite bewildering potentially what these things can do. So, what some of those, how do I go about understanding what it can do for me as a business, the kind of features of what it can deliver for me, because that can be a little bit bewildering as well for a business owner.
Yeah, I think on that's probably the step you will only find out once you do get in touch with a supplier.
Yeah.
And then you have the choice as to what kind of relationship you're going to have with the supplier. Yeah. If, for example, I'm taking off my ZOHO hat. If you are dealing with Microsoft Dynamics, if you're dealing with HubSpot, if you're dealing with Salesforce, that kind of organization, you'll be dealing with one of their local resellers. Sure. If you're dealing with someone like ZOHO or other smaller vendors who maybe are based in the UK, then you might be dealing with a partner, or you might be dealing direct with the vendor. And so when you trying to get the feel of how the CRM system will work for your business, that will very much depend on the person doing the presentation to you.
Yeah. I suppose back a step then with regards to that, you just kind of have to think about the kind of features and the interfaces you need to support the way you want to sell. So it goes back to that, pre-selection kind of thing, in terms of what features do you want and what interfaces do you need to be able to support the way you want to sell. And that can help inform the decision when you're having that conversation. Is that right?
It does, but it's a really tricky situation there, because all of us, I blame us marketers on this, not CRM suppliers. When we write something
I blame marketing too, often.
We can do absolutely everything if you read what we say in marketing, and it's absolutely true, but it's not a question of whether you can do it, it's how you do it. We had one terrible situation with, again, a previous organization. I'll come on to it more in the next episode, where basically something could do something, strictly speaking, but the way it did it was absolutely unworkable. So when you're looking at what you want to do, when you're trying to decide if a CRM system will suit your business, the only way you're going to find that out is by having a look at it in action. Now, that could be practically every system does a demo version of the software. So depending on your budget and your resources, one way of doing it is just to download the demo version, start playing around with it, and see if you can work out for yourself how it works. I think you'll find every vendor, well, vendors like ZOHO certainly will do a demo version, and it might have a time limit on it, but little sneak tip here, they'll always extend the demo period. If you say you're still looking at it, you haven't got the time to finish, they'll extend that demo period. So you can have a look. If you don't have the resources or the skills to do that yourself, that's when you need to start talking to a partner, maybe earlier, once you've done your, if you like, almost an RFP or an RFI, to say, this is what we need a system to do. Show me how it works. And this is a critical thing, actually.
Yeah, it is.
When you're getting a demo from a supplier, whether it's the vendor itself or one of the vendor's partners, give them your specification of what you want a CRM system to do. If they then come in to show you a demonstration and they start a generic demonstration, throw them out straight away.
Yeah, which they will do. They will do. Some will do that.
Absolutely will, because you would have taken a lot of time by that point producing that specification of, this is how my business works. These are my sales processes. This is what I need from a system. If you haven't bothered to come prepared to show me that, A, you're an idiot, and B, you're massively disrespectful.
Yeah,
so
you totally are. Yeah, I've gone through all of these, because all these tips are absolutely fantastic, Steve. And in terms of this, getting it ready. So once you've got your business, at the stage you think, right, we've done it, all of these great tips. We've got the team together. We've looked at our internal processes and we've really designed them. We've really thought about how we want to engage with our customers and how we're going to utilize that data. And now I'm going to have that phone call with we'll come on to that in our next part. If they, you've got to look at their own internal sales process, because if they're now just going to blindly talk to you about the generic CRM system, then really you do need to show. That's the first red flag, right? Before you even decide whether or not.
It absolutely is. I mean, and again, a tip of how things actually work with let's just say an organization I won't name, but Bill Gates used to be involved with it. We had one of their resellers come in and they basically turned around and said, well, we're not going to show you how your business would work, because that's basically pre-consultancy. That's us building the system for you. Now, at that point, there's a certain validity to that argument, that they would have to create a custom demonstration. But that could be a moment at which it says, this is the wrong type of organization for us to deal with.
That's right.
Because if they can't easily adapt their software, if there is no out-of-the-box solution, then maybe it doesn't work. And again, we talked about the typical sales geek audience. If you're in the SME sector, something like Dynamics that basically doesn't have a out-of-the-box solution, everything has to be customized and built. Maybe that's not the right system for you. Again, I'm not banging the drum saying
no, it's right though. It absolutely is right.
Think about whether that organization and whether that platform is a good fit for you.
I agree. And so that, just sort of bringing this kind of part to its close, because I think we've really got some great tips with regards to that. I think one of the things I've not considered is, as a business, because I'm thinking of it right now, suddenly we're going to adopt a technological platform, I'm going to go into that space. What do I have to think about from a skills perspective for my business? What do I need to have in my team? Because, there are people on that scale, aren't they, in terms of comfort level with technology. So, is that a consideration before I even have that conversation with a provider in terms of what the skills are in my business to be able to make sure we adopt this?
It absolutely is. It's not just skills, it's also things like staff turnover. If you're employing people on minimum wage who come and go very quickly, there's no point giving someone a system that takes 6 months to learn because they'll
Yeah.
constantly, you'll have to have a team of people correcting the mistakes all the time.
Yep.
So you've got to understand the skill level and the, if you like, the longevity of your staff to work out what kind of system, because again, it's not what you can do, it's how you do it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a question of, every CRM system out there is customizable. This is what I mean by, there's no point looking at the specifications we and anyone else put on a website to decide whether a system is good for you, because every system is customizable. But
That's right.
how customizable is it?
Yeah.
Is it easy to do? And again, if every system, I don't know every system. A lot
Yeah,
of systems,
broad statement.
a lot of systems will give you a facility to change the way fields are presented on screen. And that can have a massive effect on how usable a system is.
Yeah.
If you've got 200 fields of information per contact in your CRM system, most people won't want to see those 200 fields of information. They'll probably want to see 20. If you've got a way to show John 20 fields and Sarah a different 20 fields, depending on their job roles, you've got a system that actually works for your people and that they can use. So
That's
you've
right.
got to be able to do that, because that will then suit the skill level and the simplicity that people need. Another great example is the mobile app. A lot of people simply change CRM because the CRM system they had didn't have a mobile app.
That's right.
And one of the wonderful advantages, I found out about this years ago when we were looking at Salesforce, I think, at a different business. And they had a mobile app, and they were saying how their salespeople could just dictate meeting notes into their CRM system. And I thought that's a brilliant feature of Salesforce. And of course, it's not. It's a feature of practically any mobile phone. When you've got a text field on a mobile phone, you punch that little microphone
button.
and start talking. It's in iPhones, it's in Android phones, it's in everything. So all of a sudden, you've got a wonderful usability feature that's actually got nothing to do with the CRM system, but it just makes the system so much easier to use.
It does.
If you train people to use that kind of thing.
I think that's the bit as well, because I'm thinking with my sales leader hat on here. One of the considerations I've always had to think about before putting any kind of CRM in is that comfort level. Where people are on that spectrum of being comfortable with technology, mobile phones. Because they can be quite complex, but we make them complex more often than not. You can simplify it a lot of the time. So I have to just think as well of all of these other considerations before I even put a CRM in place is, where's that comfort and skill level with my team to be able to pick this up? Because one of the things we'll come on to in the next part is about the adopting and the implementation. And you don't want it to be a barrier that your team they may say that it's a different reason as to why they don't want to use a CRM, but in reality, it's because they're not comfortable with a technology or a technology-based solution to be able to help them with the job. You can overcome that. And in some cases, I've seen individuals who would be the first ones to say, oh, I'm not using that. I don't like technology. And after 6 months with, support, development and training, they say, take this CRM out of my cold, dead fingers. I wish I'd always had it, kind of thing. So, well, listen, Steve, I think that's brought the first part to a lovely end there. I think at the end of this, we're going to put up these tips on the screen for users to be able to sort of see some of this, in terms of its chronological order, in terms of some of the tips that for before you even purchase a CRM. So I look forward to talking to you in the next part, Steve, which is going to be more about the implementation and adoption. And thanks very much for your discussion so far.
Look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Steve.
Bye-bye.